Heat pinned the town against the prairie like a moth on cork. Boards on every storefront curled at the edges. Dust rose in faint columns and settled again without purpose. Toward the back of the auction yard, where broken wagons sagged beside splintered fence rails, a single stall leaned away from the main crowd. Behind it, chained to a ring in a warped wall, sat the girl no one wanted. Ezekiel Hart came for salt and wire, nothing more. 15 years had sanded words from his tongue, left his presence thin as fence shadow at noon. He crossed the yard deliberate, boots brushing powder that muffled steps. Bidders drifted around pens of bawling calves, shouting half-hearted numbers. The auctioneer's bell clanged over laughter brittle as dry glass. None of it touched him. Wind moved harder against his coat than any voice had in a decade. At the far rail he paused. The girl was a knot of bone and dust, knees tucked, wrists linked by scabbed iron-toe post. Dress torn mid-calf, cotton dyed in sun and grime. Blood darkened one temple where a cut had crusted. Yet her eyes tracked every shifting light, every mote in the heat, as if mapping ways out that did not yet exist. A man in rolled sleeves lounged nearby, boot on crate, scrawling figures on a ledger. Wild stock, he muttered without looking up. Taken too far south to fetch bounty. Won't speak, won't obey. Useless. Zeke's hand found the last silver dollar in his coat. No voice surfaced. He stepped forward, set coin on the crate. The man glanced, shrugged, one coin more than he expected. Ledger closed with a puff of dust. Zeke knelt. Chain links rasped as he eased tension, cold bite against scarred knuckles. Shackle pin bent under the claw of his folding knife, slipped free. The girl did not flinch. She only lifted wrists, examined the purple grooves, then the empty ring in the wall. Confirmation. He straightened. No crowd gathered. No whisper trailed them. Interest had shifted 2 pens over where a roan colt reared. Sunlight hammered the street. Zeke guided her toward a wagon loaded with salt blocks and coils of barbed wire. She walked barefoot, soles white with dust, stride steady, unhurried. At the water trough he dipped a tin ladle, offered it. She drank slow, the motion economical. Droplets traced the hollow beneath her cheekbones, carving rivers through grime. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her wrist exactly as he had once done returning from war. They rode out without a word. Wagon wheels found ruts. The gelding leaned against the bit in long, weary rhythm. Town shrank into shimmering air, lost behind juniper and low shale ridges. The plains opened, horizon pouring itself wider than any memory. The girl sat on the rear plank, knees up, gaze fixed on a line of storm clouds bruising the far sky. Zeke drove, wind folding silence around them both like rough canvas. Toward dusk, they reached the farm. 3 buildings dwarfed by fields of brittle corn and uncut tumbleweed. The house leaned west, paint peeled to raw pine. No smoke rose from the stovepipe. Chickens scratched the yard without interest. The pump creaked once when wind nudged its handle. Zeke halted the team, climbed down, unhitched traces with slow ritual. The girl waited until he gestured, open hand, toward the porch. She stepped past him, eyes scanning doorframe, window gaps, eaves, every angle where threat might reside. Satisfied or too weary, she crossed to the barn instead. Inside, dust bled through warped slats. Hay dust floated in slanted beams. She found a corner, settled on folded grain sacks, knees drawn. He laid a blanket within reach, gray wool, washed thin. Her fingers brushed fringe before he turned away. In the kitchen, a single kerosene lamp lit the table. Zeke filled 1 plate with beans, 1 cup with water. Set them on the porch rail outside the barn. Returned to the house. Ate his own supper in the hush between stove ticks. Night seeped through cracked panes, smelled of juniper and distant rain. Hours later, lamp low, he stepped onto the porch. Plate empty, cup drained, arranged exactly where he'd left them. In their place sat an acorn capped in fresh spider silk. Tiny gift harvested from somewhere beneath barn eaves. He pocketed it, unsure why. Moon climbed. Barn persisted, black shape against star grit. From inside drifted the faintest hum. No tune, just vowel of breath through lips closed around quiet. Wind shifted, carried the sound to his scarred ear. Not language, but presence, curling under the door until it reached his boots. He watched stars peel across sky until chill climbed his spine. Closed the door behind him, banked the fire, lay on the cot. For the first time in years, the house did not echo. It listened. Outside, hooves of memory stopped pounding, replaced by the soft rasp of hay as a girl, no longer chained, adjusted a blanket he'd left in silence. Somewhere on the table an acorn dried, spider silk gleaming faint, waiting to root in whatever soil tomorrow allowed. Sun rose raw and colorless, scraping hoarfrost off the pasture like a dull knife. Ezekiel pulled on his coat, stepped outside, boots whispering in pale dust. Barn doors gaped. Cold seeped out, carrying the muted rustle of straw. Inside, the girl, Lena, he learned the name from a faint bead-woven tag tied to her dress hem, sat cross-legged against a beam, blanket draped over shoulders. She watched him without startle, as stock animals might. Alert, unafraid, withholding trust. He tossed hay, fork tines ringing the manger. She rose, gathered stray wisps, fed the old mare whose ribs traced winter stories beneath hide. The mare nickered, more sound than Ezekiel had spoken in years. He met Lena's eyes across the stall, nod for nod, deed for deed, then left her to the quiet of animals. Chores lined up, pump frozen, fence wire sagged, corn stubble waiting for spring fire. He swung them all, split oak to fill the lean-to. When he paused, breath smoking, she knelt beside scattered chips, stacking them neat, small to large, a silent grammar of help. Noon thawed the pump seal. Water hissed into a tin pail. Lena carried it to the porch, scrubbed last night's plates with handfuls of dry grass and a sliver of soap she must have found in the washbox. He let her, the way one lets a brook decide its own course. Meals stayed plain. He set 2 bowls now, beans, hard bread softened. She accepted, sat one pace from the threshold, back to the jam, knees up. Between them, air held a charge, like storm clouds weighing the sky but holding rain. At dusk she walked the perimeter, bare feet in denning dust. He noticed her lift stones, relay them into subtle markers. 3 pebbles at the gate, 1 upright by the window's sill, a small arrow of twigs pointing east. Territory mapped, not fenced, sign language for safety, perhaps. Wind picked up after dark. Old shutters rattled like loose teeth. Corn stubble whistled. Ezekiel tied feed sacks over gaps. She followed with a spool of thread, stitching sackcloth to plank so the wind could no longer pry. When a knot snagged, she bit the string, tugging with wolf cub impatience. He handed her his pocket knife, edge dulled from fence staples. Her fingers tested weight, returned a grateful glance, brief as quail wing. Night fell. She retreated to the barn, but not before placing the acorn, now polished smooth, on the porch rail next to his lantern. Spider's silk gone, replaced by a loop of her own hair bound around its middle, dark against pale oak. He turned it under lamp glow, marveling at how still and alive a seed can look. Dreams came without smoke or screaming metal, only wind moving through open fields. Before dawn an owl cried. He woke to find the barn door half ajar, light flickering inside. He followed. Lena crouched over a shallow brass bowl, heating water on a stolen ember. Steam plumed. Scent of crushed pine needle rose to meet him. She dipped a rag, wrung it, and aired it toward the faded burn that crept from his collarbone after so many nights near cannon barrels. He flinched, habit, but she waited, eyes steady. He let cloth touch skin, warmth seeping into a pain he never named. She pressed gently, then pulled away, offering the rag. He cleaned to rest himself. She watched only long enough to know he would finish. Morning light spilled cold gold through the loft slats. He fetched 2 mugs, poured weak coffee. She added a thumb of honey he didn't know he still had, stirred with an iron nail, handed the sweeter cup to him. He drank. Sugar shocked tongue and used to anything but brine and ash. He looked at her over the rim, She waited for verdict. He tipped the mug once, gratitude, then sipped again. We're called. They dragged broken wagon boards to patch chicken coop walls, Lena lifting more than her small frame promised. When a board slipped, she grunted, wordless. Ezekiel steadied it, shoulder pressing hers for an instant. Contact brief. Enough. Rain teased. Gray sheets marched across distant ridges, but never reached the farm. Lena stood at fence line, palms up, as if measuring distance to water. Ezekiel handed her a dented canteen, gesture of apology for the stingy sky. She drank, then poured a ribbon onto hard earth, sharing. One evening, returning from riverbank with empty buckets, he found the barn swept, tools sorted, his long-dead wife's galvanized wash basin set by the door, scrubbed bright. Inside it floated one river stone, flat, round, bearing a scratch across its belly like a crescent moon. He set the acorn beside it, stone and seed, weight and promise. That night he carved a shape from cedar scrap, a small fox, tail curled over paws. Left it on her grain sack pillow. Morning showed him the figure, now tucked in her satchel, wolf hair braided around its neck. Days folded. Silence changed timbre. Not emptiness, but low music. A bark stove popping, chickens clucking, the soft click of twig markers being moved each dawn. He realized he spoke once, unplanned. Fence'll hold now. Voice cracked like a door opened after winter's shut. She turned, head tipping, a faint smile ghosting across sun-cracked lips. Not at the words, but at the sound. In twilight, he set a second chair by the porch rail. She took it, blue dusk gathering around both figures. No fireflies out here, only faint sparks from stove pipe and the steady pulse of two lungs learning to trust shared air. Wind softened. A stray cloud spilled 4 drops onto the roof. Tiny drummers announcing eventual rain. Ezekiel breathed and found the air carried not memory of fire, but the scent of pine rag and weak honey coffee. A new language, enough for now. The house, long emptied of speech, held 2 mugs cooling side by side on the sill, waiting for night's ember glow to fade and tomorrow's work to begin with the same careful silence. No longer a void, but a gentle loom where warmth, deed by deed, threaded itself into something like home. Wind baked the corn rows until leaves curled like old parchment. Day after day, Ezekiel pinched soil that sifted through his fingers as gray dust. The hand-pumped well gurgled shallow. Each bucket brought only half the echo of water. By late July, the sky stayed white at noon, a harsh lid holding back rain, but not heat. Beans withered on the vine. Chickens scratched up nothing but grit. Lena walked the boundary mornings, gathering cedar pitch, dead yucca stalks, anything that might burn clean if fire ever came. Her eyes always on the line where dun earth met bleached heaven. One afternoon the light changed. Yellow, bruise-tinged, storm signature. Thunder crawled low in the west. Ezekiel felt the prickle on scarred skin. Memories of cannon nights returned like sparks behind closed eyes. He limped to the barn, fetched 2 shovels, a rusted hoe. Lena appeared from the coop, chain, her old shackle, wrap coiled at her waist like a belt. She took the tools without ask, followed him to the corn's outer wall. Wind shifted, hot breath first, then sudden cool that smelled of lightning-split juniper. Dry stalks rattled, heads tilting as if to listen. A single bolt cracked south ridge, white fire. Minutes later a distant pop, flame finding brittle grass. Smoke bent flat with the wind, drove sideways across the flats. Within heartbeats, orange tongues crowned the mesa, racing. Ezekiel felt his chest seize, memory of the house that burned, of voices he could not save. But Lena's hand gripped his sleeve, anchor, not plea. They moved. Ezekiel hoed a break trench, swinging wood and iron in a rhythm older than war. Lena ran the row, chain uncoiling. She whipped stalks near the line, knocking them flat, green crowns pressing into dust, fuel denied. Each crack of chain merged with thunder, percussion for fire's advance. Heat roared close enough to blister air. Ember flakes whirled like red snow. Lena tore her scarf, drowned it in the half-full bucket, tied it over Ezekiel's mouth, then another across her own. They kept cutting, slamming, flattening. Ash-stung eyes, sweat-carved rivers through soot. Flames reached the down line, found no purchase, leapt sideways searching. Wind turned, storm pivot, and the fire's front peeled east, away from the farmhouse, away from hopes newly sprouting in their strange, quiet life. Clouds finally opened, rain hard as gravel. Steam burst off scorched ground. Smoke blew apart into ragged ghosts. Ezekiel dropped shovel, chest heaving. Lightning flickered farther now, harmless. Rainwater curled off the brim of his hat, slid under collar, cooled burn of old scars. Lena stood a dozen paces off, chain slack in her fist, breathing, watching the last sparks drown. He stepped toward her. She toward him. Mud sucked at boots, at bare feet. Between them charred stalks steamed. A blackened line turned barrier, then nothing at all. She unhooked the chain, heavy links clinking dull. Walked to the well, let it drop, metal flash, then splash deep below. A soft final sound that punched silence wider than all words withheld. Water rippled, stilled. She faced him, palms up, empty. Thunder rumbled away into taller hills. Wind settled, cool for the first time in months. Ezekiel opened his mouth. A single word emerged, rasping like in used hinges. Lena. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in answer. She reached, pressed soot-smudged fingers to the faded burn above his collarbone, scar that had stolen speech. The touch was light, but carried weight equal to any vow. Rain eased to a hush. They walked the perimeter, inspecting black edges. Coals fizzled, earth hissed, but the fields yet unburnt breathed damp relief. When they reached the porch, Lena paused beneath the sweetgrass braid, glanced at 2 tin mugs on the sill, now filled by rain. She tipped one toward him, drank from the other. Inside, stove coals waited cold. Ezekiel lit kindling despite summer heat, just enough flame to own the night on their terms. Lena laid the chain key, the nail that once pried her shackle, beside the cedar fox on the mantel. Metal dull, purpose ended. They sat on the floorboards, backs to warm brick, steam lifting from hair and shoulders. No talk, only the shared crackle of a small, living fire, one they chose, one that would never run wild beyond their reach. Outside, stripped corn rows sparkled under late lightning, washing themselves clean for whatever seeds autumn might ask them to carry. Winter folded itself thin and brittle. March cracked it open with shy warmth that smelled of wet cedar. The burned corn line turned to dark mulch, steam curling whenever midday sun leaned down. Ezekiel and Lena walked the furrows barefoot. Cold mud squelched between toes, soaking old ache out through their soles. He tilled slow arcs with the busted plow he had soldered straight, earth rolling heavy and damp. She followed with a canvas satchel, sowing beans, rye, sunflower, each seed pressed into soil by the flat of 2 fingers. At the trench where fire once tried to jump, she paused, dug deeper, placed the acorn he had pocketed months before. Spider silk loop long gone, but the smooth nut gleamed as though waiting for this precise pocket of loam. She covered it, touched the mound twice, a pulse given back. Afternoons filled with hammer song. Ezekiel framed a small lean-to against the south wall of the house. Boards scavenged from the charred wagon and the stall where he'd found her. Lena planed rough, edges smooth, fitted slats tighter than any tongue and groove the place had known. No bars, no lock, only a window cut square to catch sunrise. By dusk the room smelled of new pine and freedom. Inside, she set her grain-sack blanket on a proper cot, cedar fox on the sill, chain key beside. He hung a second coat peg by the door. 2 spaces now waited for coats, equal distance apart. Rain finally came, gentle. Roof, patched in silence, held sure. When thunder muttered, Ezekiel found himself smiling at the sound. The house answered with stillness, no longer bracing to burn. One gray morning, they led the old mare to the upper pasture. Fog lay in strips. Dew turned every spiderweb to lace. Cattle lifted heads, lowed soft greetings. Lena peeled an onion shoot, fed it to a calf, laughing without voice, breathy rush he'd never heard before. He let the sound settle inside him, fragile as the first crack of creek ice. Days stretched bright. She taught him small signs, 2 fingers tapping heart, then pointing to the ground, home. He practiced once. She nodded, eyes bright. Evenings they lit the stove, though air no longer needed heat, because flame meant together. 2 tin mugs steamed, his coffee thin and bitter, hers sweetened with last winter's honey. They traded sips, found middle taste. Outside, frogs tuned ridges gold. Inside, the quiet shaped itself into soft pauses that felt like speech. The first beans germinated, pale hooks pushing, shaking flecks of ash. At sunrise, she laid her palm over one tender shoot. He covered hers with his work-scarred hand. Green leaf let go of seed shell, unfurling. On the day sun sat highest, Lena walked to the river wearing the cotton dress she'd mended patch by patch. Ezekiel trailed astride behind. Water ran clear over stones, high from spring melt. She stepped in, sank to knees, face shining with sky. Turned, beckoned, open palm. He removed boots, waded through bite of meltwater, scar above collarbone puckering at the chill. At midstream she reached, brushed fingertips over that white seam, then laid his hand over the faint iron stain on her wrist left by chain. Both markings met the same cold flow, washed until skin burned clean. They returned at dusk. Crickets bowed the field alive. Wind smelled of rye heads fattening. On the porch rail, 2 mugs dried in evening air. He handed her a small copper wire circle he'd twisted from leftover fence ties, shape of a seed, but open. She slipped it over her braid, then lifted the mug that once was his wife's, handing it to him. He held it, felt its weight shift from sorrow to simple clay. Inside, they sat by the stove, though no fire burned, its grate warm from stored day heat. He spoke a second word in 15 years, voice low, certain home. She replied with the soft Apache gone, and placed her palm over his. No thunder came, only the hush of new corn leaves rubbing like quiet applause against night. The acorn mound in the garden heaved, cracked, revealed a pale root nosing downward. Silence settled. No longer emptiness, but 2 steady breaths weaving warmth through plank walls. Outside, house beams relaxed, as if satisfied they finally held something worth standing for. If this muted journey from chains to shared quiet warmed you, tap subscribe, drop a like, and tell us in the comments which moment. The firebreak chain whip, the river wash of old scars, or the 2 mugs drying in spring light, took root deepest for you. Your words keep these prairie stories growing.